3D platformers had a bit of a dry season after the general public lost interest to the genre in the mid-2000s, but it again gained some traction in the early 2010s with several successful crowdfunding campaigns for genre throwbacks, most notably A Hat in Time. Some of the games that were released between its Kickstarter announced date and its release date tried to ride at the coattails of its hype, and today's game is one of them. The Steam positive percentage of 51 doesn't promise anything groundbreaking, but perhaps Ginger Beyond the Crystal has something worth of salvaging.
For this game, the important creative people seem to be the game/production director Moises Otero, who before this has done such mobile titles as Frantic Flight and Campo Mystery Island, and the game designer Jacob Chas, who is possibly doing his debut work. This game is obscure enough that there isn't further easily findable trivia available, so let's get right into it. As narrated by who I think to be Stephen Hughes in the only part where we hear human language instead of gibberish grunts, there are these blue-hued forest inhabitants who worship a nameless goddess who gives them Ginger, a magical child who is meant to be the chosen one during dark times. And dark times soon follow when some meanie poophead uses foul magic to dim the powers of protective crystals, and all hell breaks loose! Time to get the power? Suit to pummel monsters back to whatever dark depths they came from.
Ginger himself doesn't have any dialogue, and in this game's case, silent protagonism is to the game's detriment, because he utterly lacks personality. Not that any other character is that deep, mind you. They have like one or two specific traits and are not even met, like aside from once or twice. Aside from some exceptions like the safe spot helper sprite that also doesn't say anything. Yeah, this is one of those 3D collectathons that forget that they're supposed to have a plot. Except once in a while suddenly background characters spurt out lore relevant information that they assume that the player knows already. Things like, I don't know, the main villain's name.
The world-saving mission features 3 hub worlds that are the typical clichés. A magical forest town, a Halloween town, and a seaside town that is under an alien invasion. Okay, that last one sounds more unique, but it kind of emphasizes the lackluster world building, as it's not made clear if any of the enemies are affiliated with the main villain, whose name is Maligno in case anyone cares, or if they are unrelated threats. I wasn't a fan of it when Spyro 2 did that, and you can be certain I don't like it here either. Generally, the game's atmosphere doesn't know how to mold itself for the world's needs, from which one example is the music. It is a passable Grant Kirkhope pastiche, but the game isn't jokey or whimsical enough to justify. Jesus Christ, what is that thing?!
Character design is another thing that I'm not a fan of. It feels uncanny. Like Ginger and his kind all have too realistic eyes. But many other reviewers and people in their comment sections have given more praise to the art, so perhaps I'm in the minority here. Well, perhaps gameplay can bring some jolt to the experience. I mean, I can appreciate the effort at least.
All worlds have 5 stages where the goal is to reach a crystal and purify it in order to open doors to further levels your standard collectathon formula. There are also smaller collectible crystals that are used as the currency to free villagers from whatever world they were imprisoned to, or buy stuff from a traveling merchant. However, all that the merchant sells are cosmetic items that I always ignore in the games I play, which led to me having so much money that in the following villages I was able to buy everyone's freedom the moment I got access to the center crystal after completing one level. You can also find building material to fix their houses, which increases the overall happiness of the village, which in turn... Does that do anything outside of giving achievements? I really should do more notes during my playthroughs.
Aside from finding those materials from the levels, you can also find them by doing boring side tasks for the villagers that include fetching, running and slaughtering. Well, the levels themselves seemingly give more variety to these, though only because of the merit of that levels have more variety obstacles.
Along with those, the variety is brought with several costumes Ginger gets by saving some special characters, or by from the goddess herself after defeating world bosses. In practice, this is just the equivalent of using keys in certain spots, though goddess's costume also give handy ranged attacks. This can be useful against some enemies, as the usual method of beating them with fists can have difficulties to connect, not to mention those few cases where the hitboxes don't disappear at the same time with their bodies. Basically all monsters flay themselves at the player except for these zombie cats that took me some time to realize that they are obstacles you get hurt, and the bosses from which the first one is one of those aggravating wait till long attack pattern stops to strike cases. The second boss isn't fully that, but his attack patterns can take a while as well.
As you may surmise from the material, the developers tried to solve the genre's eternity problem camera by making static, which most of the time didn't cause that much harm, but there were cases where it messed with the distance perception, which culminated in the final chase sequence that has suddenly insane demands for precision jumping and no room for errors, so after a couple of tries I just quit playing the game there. Interesting that that exact scenario has happened in this show twice in a row. Anyway, Ginger Beyond the Crystal. Yeah, it exists.
It doesn't have anything particularly offensive or hair-pulling, but it doesn't have anything distinct either, aside from weird character design choices. While a lack of nuanced narrative isn't that big of a deal in 3D platformer sphere, its mechanical aspects like combat are half-baked, but jumping and going through different scenarios can be mildly amusing. I guess this game can have its use if you want to introduce your child to video gaming, but for the rest there are better options even in the pre-Ahatin time indie scene.
I was unable to find any information on is Mr. Otero still working in the industry. Well, the firm he founded, Drakkar Studios, has been involved with some licenseware revolving around Paw Patrol and Hotel Transylvania, but there's no confirmation had he anything to do with them. Mr. Jazz, on the other hand, went full on surrealism with such works like... Hold on, I need to check these names, they are pretty hard to remember. Baobas Mausoleum, Mesmeratu, and Tamarindo's Freaking Dinner. Yeah, distinct names, and based on the pictures that I looked, they also looked well distinct. While Ginger's adventure went on without too much of a hitch, it has enough enjoyment dampening qualities that it does make a quick visit to my bottom 100 list, which means that I get to remove DuckTales. Yeah, a beloved classic to many, but I just didn't vibe with it, and I considered its sequel to be better in almost everything except soundtrack. My biggest gripe with it is that its levels are too maze-like for the gameplay's needs. I mean, why a game that has this much emphasis on exploration has a time limit?